Being trans sucks giant ass. On a medical level, we have to deal with debilitating dysphoria for which we are patients until the day we die. On a medical sociological level, we're the most marginalized medical minority in the world and half the population wants to kill us, while the other half gatekeeps our healthcare and downplays our condition to the degree that the bloodthirsty first half gets to kill us in bits and pieces. Liberals. On a metaphysical, sociological, cosmically fucked level, in the eternal mathematical equation that runs the universe, and therefore humanity, we are the ultimate representation of that which is outcast by a system because that system misidentifies it as a threat. But do you know what the one good thing is? Each other. We suffer, but we suffer together. When I was in high school, I was in constant despair over the fact that I was trans. It was the secret I felt I had to keep, and if anyone found out, I thought my life was going to be over. Something that would have helped a lot was if I had other trans people in my life to help guide me through it. There's a lot about being trans that's just fucking scary. Like, I really will never understand how transphobic people will look at that and say, yeah, that person is more privileged than me. Like, be real, dude, you know this is stupid. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that the only thing that makes being trans bearable in this world, at least for me, is that I now have other trans people I can relate to and lean on for emotional support. In fact, I probably spend more time with other trans people than I do with cis people nowadays, and I absolutely prefer it that way. For some reason that I will never understand, cis people are just incapable of empathizing with the trans experience.
I'm not upset with y'all because I know you're mentally ill.
The only people who can look out for us is us. Cis people will always throw us under the bus, and they will never take us seriously until we force them to do so. In order to do that, we have to form strong community. Unfortunately, much like most things, our community does not seem to be organized into a form which can effectively deal with transphobia, and that's because of one axis, which is, what even makes a person trans? So if you thought my last videos were controversial, you better buckle your ass, because things are about to get
contentious.
So the axis I'm talking about revolves around what people see as being validly trans. You'd think that was a pretty simple task, but to trans people, it is anything but. I haven't seen any conflict bigger than this in the trans community, and it is by far the most divisive topic. The philosophies I'm talking about are divided by one simple barrier: whether or not a person needs dysphoria to be trans. On one end of this spectrum is the
transmedicalists.
Transmedicalists, otherwise known as true scum, are the half of the trans community which essentially believes that being trans is a medical phenomenon by definition. They believe that in order for a person to be trans, they must have gender dysphoria, and this is essentially the cornerstone of their argument. Now, I personally agree that dysphoria is a core part of the trans experience. What I don't agree with is what this belief leads the transmedicalists to conclude, and that is that instead of dysphoria just being a part of the trans experience, it is essentially the entire trans experience. Transmedicalists think that being trans is solely a medical issue, which I disagree with. They believe that in order for one to be trans, one must suffer greatly. The reason all of this is significant is because what we define to be the trans experience as a people is what
the cis
get an impression from. And that's really important to our well-being, because we're at the mercy of their whims. Alright, so let me give the devil his due here for a second. Well, the obvious positive to this perspective is that it gives trans people a clear definition. If cis people see trans people as a medical phenomenon rather than a cultural one, it could lead one to believe that they would treat us more humanely. Not that that would actually happen. But okay, now that I've said all the positives, what are the negatives? The idea that trans people are purely a medical phenomenon puts us at the whims of cis people in a different, really bad way. I said that transmedicalism defines being trans more rigidly, but this runs the risk of greatly increasing the gatekeeping of trans medical care. If the cis see us as a medical phenomenon only, then the barriers to entry increase, because in order for one to get access to HRT, for example, they'll need to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And we all know how stupid cis people are when it comes to understanding the trans mind. Let's not pretend like a lot of people wouldn't get denied healthcare because of this. The other negative is that it takes the definition of what it means to be trans out of the hands of trans people and into the hands of cis people. If trans people get to define what we are, there is a cultural aspect to it that cis people will just never understand. We form our own philosophies about gender and sex. If cis people get to define what we are, then we lose our culture and our right to self-determination. But anyway, now it's time to talk about the
too cutes.
Okay, seriously, too cute? Like, can we come up with a better name than too cute? I don't know why that's the only name for these people. Anyway, too cutes are the sneediest of sneeds. And they'd probably get angry at me for saying that, but when your entire argument is that you don't need dysphoria to be trans, and that the only reason that dysphoria exists is because of cis people's bigotry, I personally think that you're living in a fantasy world. These are the kinds of people that will see a girl lamenting over how dysphoric she is to have male features and call her transphobic for even suggesting that sexual dimorphism is linked to gender in even the tiniest of ways. Now, I know I'm dissing too cutes here, but there are positives to their perspective, one being that the definition of transness is up to the individual rather than a systemic definition. This makes what it means to be trans inherently more flexible. However, this flexibility is a double-edged sword, because if what it means to be trans is so flexible that it can't be neatly defined, That makes it so that cis people are less likely to give us legal protections, and become more inclined to discriminate against us. Let me explain. If a court is deciding on whether or not to discriminate against trans people, the idea that not having dysphoria is required to be trans throws them off in the worst possible way. Because what they hear isn't that being trans is a deeply personal endeavor, they said it's a choice. And this throws our credibility as a marginalized community into the trash compactor. But I mean, hey, that wouldn't happen in real life, right? Anyways, let's move on to my own philosophy. Now, in my personal philosophy, I actually think that there is biology at the heart of being trans. Like, if you're gender dysphoric, you're trans by default, and I don't know a single person who isn't dysphoric to at least some degree. I also think it's important for cis people to understand this, as they could potentially be much less hostile if they knew we didn't have a choice. All that being said, I do think that transmedicalists go too far in defining transness by pain rather than a complex interplay between real biological truths about our inherent intersex nature and the cultures and philosophies which stem from that. On the other hand, I think that too cutes go too far in thinking that being trans is solely a social phenomenon because quote-unquote gender doesn't exist. Like, yeah, okay, in some sense it really doesn't, but that doesn't help me with the fact that I'm a female in a male body. I can't just magically make the pain go away, because there isn't a way to make the pain go away, because it's not cosmetic to me. It's my life. This is also why I call myself transsexual, by the way, rather than transgender, because to me, I'm not changing my gender. My gender was always female. Rather, I'm changing my sex to match my gender. But anyways, to me, being trans is not about pain or joy. It's about resilience. In a world where we have a condition that makes everyone around us hate us, the decision to keep moving forward and find joy and meaning in our identities and in our community is what makes being trans more than just pain. Because as for me, I have never felt more seen or understood than when I'm in the presence of other trans people. We stick together, and sometimes when I think about it, I feel kind of bad for cis people because they don't have a community like we do. That feeling of belonging is everything to me, and that belonging is what causes our people to grow into a beautiful culture of love, acceptance, and resilience. And to me, that is what defines the trans experience. Anyways, go watch my other videos. Bye! Hey, what's up guys? I just wanted to thank you all for 1,000 subscribers. We already blew past it actually. We're in like 2,000. We're almost at 3,000 now. And I just wanted to say like, this is a dream come true. So thank you for watching. Thank you for enjoying. I hope this video didn't make you angry at me because I misrepresented something or whatever. Anyway, drink water. Love you. Bye.